The egg was ugly. That was the first thing Roan Callister noticed about it. It sat in the corner of Lot 7, half buried under a broken navigation panel and 3 coils of old copper wire, and it looked like something that had given up. The shell was pale gold, or it used to be. Now it was dull, cracked along one side, and covered in a layer of gray dust so thick it looked like a rock that had once tried to be beautiful and failed. Nobody was looking at it. That was the second thing Roan noticed. Verith Station smelled like rust and too many species in one place. The auction hall was a wide, low-ceilinged room on the station's lower ring, lit by overhead strips that buzzed and flickered at random. It held about 60 beings at any given moment. Dravesi traders in their layered coats, Tharesi scholars with their long necks bent over datapads, and a handful of free trade brokers of species Roan could not name, all moving through the lots with the practiced look of people who already knew what they wanted. The remnant auction happened every third rotation. It was where things went when no one claimed them. Broken ship parts, salvaged cargo, junk, and occasionally, something that had been sitting in a collector's vault for so long that even the collector forgot what it was. Roan had come for a replacement fuel converter. He had found one in Lot 3, bought it for 8 coins, and was on his way out when Lot 7 opened. He stopped. The egg was not the biggest thing in the lot. It was not the most expensive. The Dravesi merchant beside him, tall, 6-limbed, wearing a coat worth more than Roan's ship, glanced at the egg, made a sound low in his throat that translated roughly to irrelevant, and went back to his datapad. The auctioneer, a bored Tharesi with ink-stained fingers, began listing the lot contents in a flat voice. Navigation panel, no model number, likely non-functional. Copper cable, assorted, 3 units. 1 decorative relic, species unknown, confirmed biologically inert by 3 Conclave xenobiologists, no resale category assigned. Roan looked at the egg. It was cracked. It was dull. It was covered in dust. But under the dust, where the light from the flickering strip hit it at the right angle, the shell had a color that had no name Roan could think of. Not gold, not ivory, something between them, like the inside of a shell you find on a beach after a long wave. He raised his hand. 1 coin for the egg. The auctioneer stopped mid-sentence. Just the egg. Just the egg. The Dravesi merchant turned to look at him. So did 3 others nearby. There was a pause, the kind that happens when someone does something so strange that the room needs a moment to process it. 1 coin, the auctioneer said again, as if saying it twice would reveal hidden meaning. For the inert relic. Yes. Another pause. Then the auctioneer shrugged, or made the Tharesi equivalent of a shrug, which involved his shoulders and 2 of his secondary fingers, and said, sold. The Dravesi merchant said something in his own language. His translator unit caught it a half-second late. Terrence. They buy garbage and call it treasure. Roan picked up the egg with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, and warm, faintly, just barely, which he put down to the heat of the auction room. He carried it back to the Iron Bell through 2 docking corridors and 1 very crowded lift, nodding politely to everyone who stared at him carrying a large cracked egg through a space station. His ship was a mid-range hauler, functional, and not much else. He had owned it for 6 years. It was the color of old pewter and had a dent on the starboard side that he kept meaning to fix. He set the egg down in the cargo hold, near the aft engine block where the heat from the drive leaked steadily through the insulation. He stood there for a moment, looking at it. I don't know why I bought you, he said out loud. He often talked out loud when he was alone. It was a habit he had developed in his 2nd year of solo trading and never bothered to break. You're probably just a rock that looks like an egg. The egg said nothing. He went to make dinner. He ate alone, as usual. He filed his departure papers, ran his standard checks, and went to sleep in the pilot's chair with his boots still on. He was nearly asleep when he felt it. Not heard, felt. A vibration, faint and low, traveling up through the floor from the cargo hold below. He assumed it was the engine. He was wrong. It happened on the 22nd day out from Verith Station, in the dead quiet of deep transit, when there was nothing outside the windows but stars that were too far away to be useful. Roan was eating cold noodles at the small table bolted to the wall of his kitchen unit when he heard the sound. It was not a vibration this time. It was a crack, clean and sharp, like a knuckle popping, followed by a second crack, and then a long, slow grinding noise that he felt in his back teeth. He put down the noodles. He walked to the cargo hold. The egg had split. Not broken, split, cleanly, from the crack along the side outward in 4 directions, like a fruit opening because it was ready. Pieces of pale shell lay on the cargo floor in a rough circle. In the center of the circle, sitting in a small pile of what looked like gold dust, was the smallest creature Roan had ever seen. It was the size of his forearm. It had 4 limbs and 2 wings folded tight against its back. Its scales were pale gold, not the dull, dusty gold of the shell, but the real thing, warm and soft like afternoon light through a window. The tips of its wings were silver. Its eyes, when it opened them, were amber with thin cracks running through the color, like old glass with the light behind it. It looked at him. He looked at it. Roan said. The creature made a sound. Not a roar, not a hiss. A small, uncertain sound, like a question with no words attached to it. Roan crouched down. He had no idea what it was. His ship's database had no results when he described it, which meant it was either extinct, off-record, or something no one had thought to catalog. He ran through his mental list of what one does when a small, unknown creature hatches in your cargo hold. The list was short. Mostly it amounted to, do not panic, do not frighten it, figure out what it needs. It was shivering. He went and got a spare blanket from the bunk storage. He laid it on the floor near the engine wall where the warmth was strongest. The creature watched him do this. Then, with the careful, wobbly steps of something that had not used its legs before, it walked to the blanket and sat on it. Roan named her Solen. He was not sure why she was a she. He had no way of knowing, but she felt like one, and he had learned years ago to trust his instincts on small things. The first 3 days were problem-solving. She would not eat the protein rations he offered. She would not drink water from the small dish he placed nearby. On the second day, he found her gnawing on a piece of scrap copper pipe from the supply rack, and something clicked. He gave her a handful of metal shavings from the engine maintenance kit. She ate them the way a satisfied animal eats something it has been wanting for a long time. He gave her strips of raw protein pack after that, and she ate those too. He started talking to her. It was a habit, and she seemed to like it. She would sit near him while he ran checks or plotted routes, and she would watch his hands move over the controls with the focused attention of something that was learning. When he pointed at something and said its name, she would look at it. After a while, she would look at it before he pointed. By the end of the first week, she was the size of a large dog. He contacted his one xenobiology contact, a retired Theresi scholar named Duvin, who owed him a favor from 3 years back involving a misdelivered crate of specimen jars. He sent a description. No image. He was not sure why he held back the image. Some instinct. He just described. For limbs, 2 wings, pale gold scales, silver wing tips, amber eyes, eats metal and protein, growing fast, watching everything. Duvin's response took 2 days. It was one line, Roan. That is not possible. Do not tell anyone. He was still staring at that message when Solen climbed up onto the co-pilot's chair beside him and sat there, looking out at the stars with an expression he could only describe as interested. He noticed, on the same day, that the engine efficiency report was reading 11% higher than usual. No mechanical explanation. The diagnostics showed nothing wrong. He checked the fuel lines, the intake filters, the calibration on the drive core. Everything was fine. Solen yawned. A thin curl of warm air came out of her mouth. The instrument panel directly in front of her glowed, slightly warmer than the rest. Roan looked at her. He looked at the efficiency reading. He looked back at her. You're heating the engine, he said. She looked at him. That is either very helpful, he said, or very dangerous. We'll see which. She put her head down on the edge of the console and closed her eyes. Her scales made a faint sound when she breathed, like wind across dry grass. Roan sent one word back to Duvin. Coming. Duvin was old. Old enough that his neck had developed a slight permanent curve, and he moved through the Iron Bells corridor sideways, the way Theresi of advanced age sometimes did when their spine had stopped cooperating. He smelled faintly of preservation chemicals and old paper. He had brought a bag. It was very large. He had clearly packed for a long stay without being invited. Roan let him in. Solen, who was now the size of a young horse and took up most of the cargo hold, opened one eye when Duvin entered. Then she closed it. Duvin stopped walking. He stood in the doorway of the cargo hold for a full 30 seconds without speaking. Then he sat down on the floor, right there in the doorway. Just sat down. She's real, he said. I noticed, Roan said. It took Duvin a long time to start talking, and when he did, Roan made tea and sat across from him and listened without interrupting, which was something he was better at than most people gave him credit for. The story was not short. The short version was this: dragons were not extinct. They had hidden. About 800 years ago, when the early Conclave was still forming its trade agreements and its laws, certain Conclave members had begun harvesting dragons. Not hunting them, harvesting them. The scales had energy properties that no artificial material could replicate. The fire glands could be extracted and processed. The bones were useful in high-stress construction. The Conclave had not called it hunting because they had passed a law first, classifying dragons as biological resources rather than sapient beings. It was cleaner that way, legally. The dragons had not fought back. They had disappeared. Every last one, in the span of about 40 years. The Conclave declared them extinct shortly after and moved on. The remaining eggs were collected, tested, declared inert by xenobiologists who had never seen a living egg and did not know what to look for, and eventually sold off as curios. They were not inert, Roan said. No, Duvin said. They were in stasis. Deep, biological stasis. A state the egg enters when the environment is wrong. Too stable, too controlled, too consistent. Dragon eggs need variation, irregular warmth, inconsistent heat cycles. Every species or institution that had one before kept it in a climate-controlled case at a perfect constant temperature. He paused, which is exactly the wrong thing. Roan looked at his engine room wall. My engine runs hot when I push it and cool when I don't, he said. Which is always, because it's old and I'm on a budget. Yes, Duvin said. And nobody with a working ship ever bought an egg because they looked worthless. Also yes. There was a silence. From the cargo hold came the sound of Solène shifting her weight, and the soft noise her scales made when she moved. Roan said, How smart is she? Duvin hesitated in the way people hesitate when they know the answer will be surprising. Older accounts describe dragons as more intelligent than any species currently in the Conclave. Not in a technical sense. They were not builders or engineers by nature. But their memory was absolute. Their ability to understand language was immediate. They were, by every measure available to the scholars who documented them, fully sapient. Persons, not animals. Roan absorbed this. He thought about the way Solène washed his hands on the controls. The way she had looked at the efficiency reading the same moment he had. The way she positioned herself, always, so that she could see both him and the door. She already knows everything I've said in front of her, he said. It was not a question. Almost certainly. They both looked toward the cargo hold. That was when Solène walked in. She stepped carefully over the raised threshold, folded herself down onto the floor, and looked at Duvin with a long, patient expression. Then she looked at Roan. Then she reached out with one forelimb and tapped the hull panel beside her, gently, twice. The panel had a stress fracture in it. One Roan had been meaning to patch for a month. She had noticed it before he had, and she was pointing it out. Roan made a note on his datapad. Duvin made a sound that was not quite a word. She's been fixing things, Roan said. 2 days ago she melted a stuck coupling with one breath, then sealed it back up cleaner than it was before. I thought it was an accident the first time. It was not an accident, Duvin said quietly. No, Roan agreed. I know that now. Duvin opened his bag and took out a very old datapad. The casing was cracked and the screen had been replaced at least twice. There is more you need to know, he said. A Conclave intelligence unit intercepted my communications. The ones I sent you. I used an old personal channel. I did not think anyone was still monitoring it. Roan went still. How long ago? For days. I came directly after I found out. Duvin looked at Solène. Someone in the Biological Assets Division has been notified. I don't know what they know yet, but they know something exists. Roan set down his tea. Solène looked at him. Her amber eyes were steady and calm, the cracks in them catching the light. She had the expression of someone who had already thought about this and was waiting for the people around her to catch up. All right, Roan said. He picked up his datapad and pulled up his navigation screen. Then we need to move, and we need a plan. He looked at Solène. Any thoughts? She tilted her head, very slightly, toward his legal reference archive on the corner shelf, the one he had not opened in 2 years. Roan stared at it. Then he got up and took it down. The official document arrived in Roan's transmission inbox at the 3rd hour of ship night, which meant someone had sent it urgently enough not to care about the time difference. The subject header read, Conclave Biological Assets Division, Writ of Reclamation, Mandatory Compliance Required. He read it over his morning tea. Then he read it again. Director Verith of the Biological Assets Division had issued, under the authority of the Conclave Collective Resource Management Act, a formal demand that Roan Callister surrender the living organism currently in his possession, identified as an Apex-class biological entity of extinct classification, to the nearest Conclave collection facility within 72 hours. Failure to comply would result in arrest, full impoundment of the vessel Iron Bell, and possible reclassification of Terran trade status from permitted to restricted. That last part was the sharp end. Restricted trade status for Terrans would cost Earth's economy in a way that would be felt by real people who had nothing to do with Roan or his egg. He set down his tea. He read the writ a 3rd time, slowly, looking for the specific words and what they meant in the exact order they were written. Then he pulled up the legal archive. The Verith Accords, which governed all licensed auctions on Conclave-affiliated stations, were not exciting reading. They had been written by committee, revised 16 times over 2 centuries, and contained a section on appeals and transfer of biological material that most people had never bothered with because most things sold at remnant auctions were not biological. Article 7 was 3 paragraphs long. It said, in the dry language of bureaucratic law, that any biological material, including dormant, inactive, or undeveloped biological potential, sold at a licensed Conclave auction transferred to the buyer completely and without reservation. The seller, in accepting the terms of the auction house, certified that no prior claim remained on the item or its contents. The biological certification, in this case, the Conclave's own xenobiologist declaring the egg inert, did not void the transfer. It completed it. The Conclave had declared the egg to contain nothing of value, then sold it. They had sold whatever was inside it, including what that thing might become. Roan sat with this for a long time. Duvin, who had been reading over his shoulder in the polite but undeniable way of old scholars, said, "That is a real argument." "I know," Roan said. "It is also a very dangerous one to make." "I know that too." He spent the next 4 hours writing the legal counterclaim with Duvin's help, cross-referencing every citation twice, checking the exact statute wording against the official archive 3 times. Then he did 2 other things. He contacted Sarah Voss, a free trader journalist who ran a small news feed covering independent shipping and conclave policy for about 40,000 readers across 6 systems. He had met her twice at trade fairs. She was sharp, and she was not friendly to the Conclave's asset division, which had seized 2 independent vessels in the past year on claims that later turned out to be fabricated. He told her everything, on the record, with full documentation. Then he went to the cargo hold. Selene was awake. She had been awake for a while, he suspected. She watched him come in with the same patient, steady attention she always gave him. He held up the writ. "Director Verith says you're Conclave property. Biological asset. Says I have to hand you over." She looked at the document. "I'm not going to," he said. "But I want you to know that's the situation." Selene reached out, took the edge of the document between 2 claw tips with a precision that would have done a surgeon credit, and breathed on it. One small, controlled breath. The writ caught, burned completely, and left no ash. "Just gone." "Right," Roan said. "Okay." When Sarah Voss published the piece 6 hours later, the headline read, "Human refuses Conclave order TO, surrender, living dragon, cites auction law." It was the most read item on her feed in 3 years. By the end of the day, it had been shared to 14 other outlets and 2 alien language networks. The reader responses fell into roughly 3 groups. The first group thought Roan was insane. The second group thought he was right. The third group, a lot of them minor species traders who had spent years watching the Biological Assets Division take what it wanted, thought he was doing something they had wanted someone to do for a long time. Sarah Voss sent a follow-up request. Could Selene make any kind of statement? Roan brought the question to the cargo hold. He explained, carefully, what a statement would mean and how it would be read. Selene thought for a moment. Then she looked at him and began to gesture. Deliberate, slow, the same gesture she had seen him use when he was choosing his words carefully. It took him a while to understand, and another while to put it into language. But when he sent it back to Sarah Voss, it read, "I am not property. I was never property. The one who woke me owns nothing of me, and I owe him everything." Sarah published it verbatim. The Conclave's response arrived the next morning. They were dispatching an enforcement cruiser. Duvin, reading the notification, made a small, frightened sound. Roan made another cup of tea. The Verith's mandate came out of transit 700 kilometers off the Iron Bell's port side, and it was not subtle about it. Enforcement cruisers were not built to be subtle. They were built to be large, clearly armed, and unambiguous in their message, which was, cooperate, or experience the consequences of not cooperating. It was 4 times the size of the Iron Bell. It had a crew of 90 and weapon systems designed for subduing freighters and haulers that refused compliance orders. It had never lost a compliance action. Its captain sent a hail within 30 seconds of dropping out of transit. Roan accepted the channel. The captain was Dravesi, middle-aged, with the careful voice of someone who was used to being the most powerful thing in a conversation. He identified himself, identified his ship, cited the writ number, and informed Roan that he had 10 minutes to prepare the organism for transfer. Roan said, "I filed a legal counterclaim under the Verith Accords, Article 7. The filing number is in your message queue. I'd appreciate if someone over there could read it before we go further." A pause. "The filing has no binding authority over an active writ of reclamation. That's a matter for the High Review Board, not for either of us," Roan said. "But since we're waiting for a ruling, I don't think there's any hurry." Another pause, longer. Roan could hear the murmur of consultation on the other end of the channel. He was broadcasting on an open civilian frequency. He had been broadcasting on an open civilian frequency since before they arrived. Every ship within signal range, 3 independent haulers, a survey vessel, and a Theresi academic transport, was listening. He cut his mic for a moment and looked at Duvin. "Is she ready?" Duvin looked like a man who had not expected to be part of a confrontation with a Conclave enforcement cruiser when he packed his bag. "She has been ready since last night," he said quietly. The cargo bay doors opened outward. Solen came out slowly, which was the right choice. Fast would have looked aggressive. Slow said something different. It said, "I am not afraid. I am not threatening. I am simply here, and I am letting you see me." She was fully grown. The Iron Bell's cargo bay had become too small for her in the past week. She had been folded into it more than resting in it, and her wingspan, when she opened it now in open space, stretched 40 meters from tip to tip. Her scales caught the light of the distant sun and scattered it in every direction, pale gold gone brilliant. Her silver wing tips shimmered. She positioned herself between the cruiser and the Iron Bell and stopped. She did not advance. She did not posture. She simply existed in the space between them, enormous and calm, and waited. On the Verith's mandate, 90 crew members who had grown up in a galaxy where dragons were a historical footnote, something from old texts, something that no longer existed, looked out of their viewports and experienced something that none of their training had prepared them for. The channel stayed silent for a long time. Roan unmuted himself. He had written what he was about to say the night before. Not because he was a natural speaker. He was not, but because some moments deserved words chosen carefully. "My name is Roan Callister. I am a Terran salvage trader. 43 days ago, I bought an egg at a licensed Conclave auction on Verith Station for 1 coin. The Conclave's own xenobiologists certified that egg as biologically inert. The Conclave's own auction house sold it to me under the full terms of the Verith Accords. What hatched from that egg is not a biological asset. She is not property. She is a person, by every measure of sapience and self-determination available to any law in this conclave. I am prepared to defend that position legally, publicly, and in whatever other way becomes necessary." He paused. "Captain, I'd ask you to read my filing." The channel stayed quiet. Through the viewport, Solen hung in space without moving. Then, on the open frequency, a second voice joined. One of the hauler captains, a Theresi Independence trader named no one in the conversation had introduced, said, simply, "We're watching." Then the survey vessel, "Watching." Then the academic transport. Then, after a short delay, a fourth ship that had not been there before, a free trader runner that had dropped out of transit nearby, drawn by the open broadcast. On the Verith's mandate, the consultation murmur had become something louder, something less controlled. The captain came back on. His voice was different, still professional, but the certainty had gone out of it, the way certainty leaves a voice when a situation is no longer what it was supposed to be. We are reviewing the filing. Take all the time you need, Roan said. Solène turned her head. She looked at the cruiser. And then she did something none of them had expected. She spoke. Not a roar, not a sound of anger. In clear, measured Drevesi, the language of the cruiser's captain. She had been listening for weeks. She had been ready. She told them to go home. Calmly, without malice. She told them that no writ gave them authority over a living mind. She told them that she bore them no ill will and wished the same consideration in return. The Verith's mandate held its position for 4 more minutes. Then it turned and translated out. Roan let out a long breath. He had not been aware he was holding it. Behind him, Duvin was recording everything with shaking hands and tears running freely down his long face, which Roan politely pretended not to notice. Outside, Solène turned in space, slow, unhurried, and looked back at the iron bell. Roan pressed his hand against the viewport. She lowered her head, very slightly, in the way she had started to do when she meant to say, I see you. 6 months is not a long time in galactic law. 6 months is usually enough time to schedule a preliminary hearing, argue about which court has jurisdiction, and then schedule another hearing. But the Roan Callister case, as it had come to be called, formally titled Callister versus Conclave Biological Assets Division, counterclaim under Verith Accords Article 7, moved faster than usual because it had become impossible to ignore. 47 independent news feeds had covered it. 17 minor species had filed formal objections to the reclamation writ with the High Review Board. 2 academic institutions published papers on dragon stasis biology within 3 weeks of Duvin's preliminary findings going public. The open broadcast from the standoff with the Verith's mandate had been copied, shared, and translated into 11 languages, and the clip of Solène speaking to the cruiser in Drevesi had been watched across the conclave more times than anyone had bothered to count. The High Review Board ruled 9-2 in Roan's favor. The conclave's own xenobiologists had certified the egg inert. The conclave's own auction house had sold it. Article 7 was clear. The writ was invalid. Solène was not biological property. She was, by a precedent-setting addition to the ruling, recognized as a sapient individual under conclave law, the first non-registered species to receive that status in 200 years. The day the ruling came through, Roan was doing maintenance on the Iron Bell's fuel lines. Duvin called him on comms, voice unsteady. Roan said, "Good," and went back to the fuel lines. Director Verith was quietly reassigned to a monitoring outpost at the outer edge of mapped space, which was the conclave's way of ending a career without admitting it had ended one. Roan gave 2 interviews. He declined 40 more. He was not good at interviews. He said the same things in both. He had bought an egg because it was beautiful and no one else wanted it, and he had done what anyone would do when an animal in their care needed help. Both interviewers found this answer unsatisfying. He did not change it. The Iron Bell returned to salvage work. Solène, it turned out, was exceptional at it. Her heat sensing let her find active components in wreck sites that Roan's instruments missed. Her memory was absolute. She could recall the precise layout of every site they had visited, down to the position of individual pieces of debris. She had opinions about which salvage was worth recovering and which was junk, and she was right more often than the market analysis software. The Iron Bell's income in the following 3 months was triple its previous average. They worked well together. They always had. The precedent set by the ruling did not stay still. Within 2 months, 3 other species used it to challenge their own classifications under conclave law, 2 of them successfully. The ruling had opened something, the way a single pulled thread can open a seam that has needed opening for a long time. The conclave was not changed overnight. It was too large and too old for that. But something had shifted in it, and the people who paid attention to these things could feel the shift even if they could not yet name it. Duvin published his paper on dragon stasis biology. It was 47 pages long, included everything he had observed, and credited Solène as a primary source. She had, over many long evenings in the cargo hold, described her experience of stasis in a way that no historical record could have provided. The paper caused significant disruption in academic circles, most of it productive. Selene herself had been quiet about what came next. She spent long hours at the edge of the ship, looking outward, in a way that was different from how she usually looked at things. There was a searching quality to it. Then, one evening, she went to the comms panel in the cargo hold. She had learned to use it without Roan's help a month ago. She adjusted the frequency, past the standard ranges, past the commercial bands, into something lower and older that the equipment was not really designed for, and she sent a signal. Not a word. A tone. A sound like a bell heard at the bottom of deep water. And waited. The answer came 4 days later, from a direction that was not on any current map. Faint, unmistakable, the same tone returned with a slight variation that meant, in no language anyone had formally written down, I am here. I hear you. I am not alone. Roan, reading the signal analysis printout, sat with it for a long time. There are more of them, he said. Selene looked at him. Then she looked at the stars outside the viewport, and something in her expression was not quite what it had been before. It was fuller, somehow, like a word finally completed after too long a silence. That night, Roan fell asleep in the pilot's chair, boots on, as usual. The ship was quiet. The engine ran with the steady warmth it had run with for months, regulated now as much by Selene as by any mechanical system. She was outside, curled around the hull in the dark of space, warm enough to heat the whole ship from without. She was learning the names of the stars she had watched for so long without knowing them. She was listening, in the deep quiet between signals, for others who were still waking up. Somewhere very far away, something stirred inside a pale shell in a forgotten storage unit on a station no one visited anymore. It was not alone either. It had never been a matter of one coin, or one egg, or one stubborn human who read the fine print. It had always been a matter of what happens when something lost is finally seen, not for what it is worth, but simply for what it is. Roan slept. Selene kept watch. The galaxy was larger than it had been the day before,